Hi friends, I hope everybody is doing great. I wanted to dedicate this week's shiur to the refuah shlema of the following people: Rivka bat Menucha Mensia, Leah bat Menucha Mensia, Madeleine bat Menucha Mensia, Elsa bat Menucha Mensia, Batsheva bat Menucha Mensia, Aryeh ben Menucha Mensia, Meshulam Zalman ben Pasha, Leah bat Pasha, Aharon ben Rivka, Maya bat Masha. They should all have a speedy, full recovery, and Shem should bless them. This week, we are reading about the greatest gift that God ever gave to humanity, and that is the Torah, the 10 Commandments. In Hebrew, we call it the 10 utterances. These are 10 statements, diburim, 10 statements that preserve a world that was created with 10 utterances, as we learned in Genesis and Breshit that God created the world with 10 utterances. 10 commandments that preserve the world, a Torah that preserves the world. We learn from the rabbis that if the Torah would not be learned and studied at some point in the day, at any time, at any moment, by one person or another, that the entire world would revert back to nothingness. And therefore we know that the Torah is the raison d'être and the sole reason for our existence. Existence. Do you know what the likelihood is that you would have not been born? What the odds are against the fact that you're here today? There's a few studies out there. It's quite complicated. You can follow their line of thinking. But the fact is, the chance that you are here today is 1 in 400 trillion. That's a big number. Stack it up in bills. Elon Musk looks very small and poor back next to that pile. The chances of you being born, according to researchers and how they sum up their study, is almost impossible. The chances of you being born, they say, according to their scientific calculations, is 0. And yet you're here. That's quite a fantastic happening. Now imagine that you're Jewish and you throw yourself into their calculation. So much more are you a miracle if you are here today. The Jewish people make up 0.19% of the entire global world population. 0.19%, which means we're not even 1% of the world population. So much more is the miracle that if you are born a Jew, it's against, for sure, all odds. It's against all probability. And not only the fact, by the measure of their criteria to be born at all, but the fact that since Pharaoh till today, we've been facing enemies who are bent on our destruction. From Pharaoh to Hitler to Hamas, to their cohorts, there is no lack of anti-Semitism in the world. Going back even to last Shabbat, where there was a hostage taking, not in a mall and not in a movie theater, but in a synagogue. If you are here, you are great in probability. If you are here as a Jew, you are a miracle. And God wanted you here. Against all odds, He wanted you here. And now you have to ask the follow-up question. Even if you're not a journalist like me, the follow-up question is why? And the why is because God has a mission for the Jewish people. Not because we have some intrinsic great value in our own merit, in our own worth, no. Only because God assigned us a mission, and we read about it in this week's parasha, and God says, if you will follow what I tell you, you will keep my word and my commandments, You will be a treasured people for me from among all the nations. You will be a nation of Kohanim, a holy nation. All he asks of us is keep my Torah. God liberated us from the bricks and the pits and the straw of Pharaoh, the servitude, the shackles of slavery, back-breaking labor. But he brought us into a desert and he taught us how to stand tall by giving us the Torah. We did not go from slavery to slavery. We went from slavery to freedom, because without the law, there is no freedom. And the freedom of mankind is the 10 Commandments and the Torah that God bequeathed his treasure. But every treasure, well, one, its value is based on its rarity. The Jewish people are small. There are not many of us. But a treasure also needs to be buffed and polished. And God gave us the means of buffing and polishing the gem that is us. Taught us how to nurture our souls and to be a light among the nations. Not a fright, not a might, not a plight, and not a darn sight among the nations, but to be the light, to be the torch bearers of his words, his Eser Hadibrot that last forever. Their value and their morality is not ephemeral. It is forever. It's not easy. Nobody said it was. And the difference between having the Torah and the 10 Commandments and not, it's very interesting. I heard a story that Rabbi Jacobson said in the name of another rabbi. And the story is as such. There's a young yeshiva student, and he comes to the rabbi, and he says to him, Rabbi, it's so difficult to be a human being. It is so difficult. You have to eat with a fork, and then you have to pray first, and you can't mix meat and milk, and then you have to put on your tefillin, and then you have to go to the bathroom like a normal person, and you have to get up and you have to pray, and so many things and casualties and burdens, casualties of my freedom, suppose that comes with being a human being. It's so hard. It's so hard. Why couldn't have I been born an animal? And he starts crying. Eibishter, Ribono Shalom, why can't I have been born an animal? And the rabbi tries to pacify his student, and he says, do not worry, my son, my child. You are an animal. What are we without the 10 Commandments and the Sefer Torah, other than animals? What makes us so different? We have the same needs, the same urges. We could sit down at a table and just stuff our faces, sleep with whoever you want, behave, be rude, be arrogant, be anything that you want, just as an animal is. We are, but what makes us different? What makes us different is the image of God within which we were created, and the Torah that gives us the blueprint. It's the manual to life to teach us how not to be an animal. The Jewish people brought light to the world. That was their destiny. But they were not always successful. It's unfortunate that they do not respond to the call of duty. When duty calls, they hang up the phone because being a Jew is a pain in the neck. But not being a Jew and not keeping the Torah, that is the grave. How do we know that's the grave? That is the grave of our people. That is the grave of you and me if we do not keep the Torah. Because when God gave the 10 Commandments, he held the mountain above the Jewish people. And if they would not accept it, they would have all died that day under the mountain. Literal, figurative, symbolic, probably all, because that's how the Torah works. But without the Torah, we are all dead men. The Torah is not an obsolete manual. In fact, we read in this week's parasha that when the Jews entered the wilderness of Sinai, it says, and they entered this day. Well, what do you mean this day? It was that day. It was a long time ago. It was that day with this day. No. We are in the wilderness, awaiting the Torah and offering the Torah this day, today, tomorrow, yesterday. Every day we are recipients of the Sefer Torah, of the Ten Commandments. Every day we have the mission that God sent us upon this earth to execute, to do. God tells Abraham, go before me and be perfect. Well, what do you go before me? God is a king. When a king goes, he has people in front of him, next to him, beside him. The king is not the first in the front. There's protection. There's an introduction. We are God's ambassadors. We're his messengers. We're his representatives. We're his PR agents. We go before him. How should we go before him? Be perfect. Well, how can I be perfect? It's like really hard to be perfect, right? Yes, it is. And it's a goal we will never reach. But every single day, and through every single action we take in interaction with people, with friends, with brothers, with sisters, with neighbors, with creditors, be perfect. Being religious, being Jewish, being honorable, having integrity. These are not things that we leave in the synagogue when we go out onto the streets, or once we put down our prayer books and we go out into the real world, well, there's another version of me that interacts. No. Be perfect in every interaction of your life. Go before God because you are his representative. When you meet this person, let them know that an emissary of God stood before them today. I was honest, I was decent, I was compassionate, I was merciful. I was a child and a representative of God. The Ten Commandments. The Torah has 613 commandments. Hard to keep. But most of us will say, well, you know what? I keep the 10 Commandments. I'm a pretty honorable person. That's great, but be perfect, which means that whatever your level of perfection was yesterday, it's not good enough anymore. Be perfect. Keep going up and up and up, because perfection is an endless goal. Believing in God, the first commandment, you shall have no other gods. Is it so easy to do? How many of us really have no other gods in our lives? Do you really have no other gods? Are you not worshiping your money, the doctor, the lawyer, your boss? How many of us are really worshiping God, putting our faith in the right place? I have one very, very strong sentiment that I feel that takes me along in life and now. Change your F word from fear to faith. Then you are proving that you believe in God. When there's not enough money for the bills, when you're not feeling so good, when everything is going wrong, that's when you know if you believe in Hashem or you believe in the stock market. Do you believe in God, or do you believe in the assistant manager in your job? Who is your God? You shall have no other gods. You shall not take the name of the Lord in vain. A lot of people will swear in something if it's not true. Or you'll say, God, please deliver me safely onto the tarmac and then I'll keep kosher, or whatever other thing that you say you'll do. You don't mean to be like taking God's name in vain, but you kind of use it casually and then you forget that you ever said it. Take yourself to task. Remember the seventh day and keep it holy. The If you don't do that, then for sure you don't believe in God. Don't tell me you believe in God if you are not keeping the Shabbat. Because if you believed in God and the power of that truth, and knowing that there's a punishment for not keeping Shabbat, and knowing that God tells you in the Torah, you must keep Shabbat, obviously, you will keep the laws of the land, you will keep the laws of your bank, you will keep the laws of your company, and you'll keep the laws of the road for the most part, because you know there's a police or a camera. So you believe in those systems. If you really believed in God, you would keep Shabbat. Everything else is just talk. Honor your mother and father. I'll keep this one quickly. I'll say it quickly. We think we're polite. We call our parents once a week. Honoring your mother and father is one of the few commandments in the Torah that God will actually tell you what your reward is. That your days will be long. Honoring your mother and father is like honoring God himself. And it doesn't just mean calling them once a week. It means not sitting in their chair. It means letting them think they're right, even if maybe they're wrong, but respectfully. It means even when they die, you don't act like an arrogant, cruel, vicious, lying fraud, because you are the son of. And everything you do in this lifetime after they die elevates or brings down their soul. You are the son of. Honor your mother and father. If you couldn't do it in their lifetime and it's too late, then do it now. You shall not commit murder. We all feel scot-free on that one, don't we? How many of us went around, killed anybody, one way or another? But the fact is that the Torah tells us that even embarrassing somebody, embarrassing them, is as if you had spilled their blood. Also, slaughtering somebody's reputation. They're looking for a shidduch to meet somebody, or they want to go into a business, or you just are jealous of them and you can't take it, so you don't want to see anything decent about them and you go around slandering them. The tongue is as powerful as a sword, and even more so because the sword can kill what's in front of you, but the tongue travels far and it travels wide, and it can kill those abroad and those behind you and those in front of you and next to you, and they never have a chance at life because you killed them. So maybe you're not as good as you think you are. Thou shalt not commit adultery. I had a friend who told me once, someone who cheats on his wife, I will never do business with him. You cheat on your wife, you cheat on God. You cheat on your husband, you cheat on God. Thou shalt not commit adultery. But in today's society, everything goes. There's always a reason why. If it wasn't for my mistress, I would have killed myself already. Or my marriage only lasted because I had a friendship with this girl. We always make excuses and justify why it's okay. I am a big rabbi, so it's okay if I cheat because I do so many other mitzvot on the side. It's okay if I'm cheating on my wife. Or I give a lot of money to charity, so it's okay. Adultery is a sin. It's one of the 10 commandments. You cannot change the rules because God tells Moses, take these words that I'm giving you today, these words. In other words, God's words, not your words, your interpretation, how you are justifying your actions. God's words are the words. Something you need to get right. Thou shalt not steal. Okay, so in the time of Noah's flood, one of the main reasons that the world was destroyed was because of thievery. Shall not steal. Now you would think people were running away with precious jewels and diamonds and treasures. because none of us would really do that, and we feel we're honest. The sin of those days was stealing insignificant amounts of things. They were so small that there was no recourse in the law for that. You go to a grocery, you take a grape, you take a napkin, you take a sweet and low, you take a sugar, you take the stick. But you're not a client there. You had no right. You grabbed it on the go. It's so nothing. It's a small infraction, except that the next guy and the next guy, and this man is in business for 12 hours, 20 hours a day, a 24-hour business. Everybody has the same idea. Here, here, here. This is not free. And that was the problem with the generation of the flood. They stole brilliantly. There was no way to sue them. There was no way to have justice. Every action we do, are you stealing something from somebody? Are you stealing their time? Are you stealing attention away from a bride? You decided because you're so gorgeous that you're going to come in and look better than the bride. What are you doing in your life that's a little bit stealing from somebody else? Another thing to think about in the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor. None of us, some of us would, some people would, they go to courts. Well, that's not against your neighbor, but to be a false witness in general, I mean, you're not allowed to do that. Whether it's in court to fight a ticket or you're putting your hand on the Bible, you're swearing, you are not allowed to lie and to be a false witness. So much more against your neighbor, or maybe even yourself. I don't want to say that your neighbor is worth more than you. Maybe you don't go to court and say, yeah, I did. I saw he killed his wife when he didn't. Okay, but exaggerating on something. First of all, we're not allowed to talk about our neighbors. We're not allowed to be tale bearers and gossip mongers, slandering Lashon Hara. We are not allowed to do that to begin with. Even if the thing is true. You know, they just bought a Rolls Royce. It's true. Why do you have to go telling everybody? Are you like working for CNN? Why do you have to go telling everybody? But being a false witness, you saw her come home with a little bag, this big, shopping. Oh my God, I saw her come home shopping today, and she had like 24 bags. So I mean, you kind of threw the truth in there as an alibi. But you were a false neighbor. Well, you know what? The neighbor's oh my God, she has money, I don't have money. Really, her husband's going broke. Why is she spending that much? You don't know what you just started. You think it's an innocent sentence? There are no innocent sentences. God created this world with words because words have such tremendous power that the 10 Commandments are the 10 statements. The 10 statements that uphold a world created with 10 utterances. And the final commandment is, you shall not covet. Not your neighbor's donkey, his wife, nothing. You shall not covet. It's an amazing commandment because in civil law they can tell you, do not go past this street and do not kill and do not whatever in civil law, but do not covet. Can the minister of justice or your lawyer or the judge look into your heart and know what you felt? It's only a God that can give us this commandment, you shall not covet. And it gives a list of things. And it's interesting that it gives a list of things. Why doesn't it just say, don't covet? Why does it give a list of what you shouldn't covet? For the same reason, we have the phenomenon of ayin hara, which is evil eye. In Hebrew and in English, it's translated as, I gave you an evil eye. Well, why an evil eye? Not two eyes. I have two eyes. I really saw you, like, panoramically with your new car and your fanciness and whatever else you have. I saw you. Why not with both eyes? And the reason is for the same reason that it's listing, do not covet this and that and all that your neighbor has. Because if you look at your neighbor really with both eyes, and you evaluate their life with both eyes, you see it all, you know it all, you will not covet them at all. That she has the rich husband and that she's beautiful. Do you know the price she pays for that? That he is so successful and so famous. Do you know the price that his children paid for that? Do you know what medication he has to take or alcohol to imbibe himself with to actually face the world with his great success? You do not know what's behind the scenes. Do not covet. And interestingly enough, that the last commandment encompasses all of them. Because if we covet, we will come to violate all the other commandments. We will think, I'm so jealous, I should have it. Really? You should have it? Well, you know what? There's only one God. He knows what you should have. So right away, you don't believe in God. Then you start doing wrong things. You start behaving in the wrong ways. You start lying. Well, I want more, so I'll work on Shabbat. I'll kill, I'll steal, I'll lie, I won't honor, I will worship other gods. It all crumbles before you within the last commandment of coveting. Being perfect, it's not easy, but not being perfect is much harder. The Jews are in the desert of Sinai. They are about to receive the greatest gift that mankind has ever received. They are in a spiritual desert. They came from a land of idol worship, of slavery, of all types of sensual indulgements. They really are morally bankrupt. They don't really know what to do. They are in a spiritual desert, as are all of us without the Torah, which is compared to water. Without the Torah, we are all parched and dry, whether we are in the desert of Montreal, the desert of Florida, the desert of Tel Aviv, or Haifa, or New York, or wherever you are in the world. Without the Torah, you are in a spiritual desert. And regardless of which faith a person is, the Word of God is for all of us. The Jewish people were not given a gift to hoard and keep unto themselves. There are things that they have to keep uniquely. But the light of the Torah is a light that we have to share, that we have to give to the whole world, because all the world are children of God. Everyone's a child of God. Everyone, according to how I started this, really is a miracle. The likelihood of any of us being here is so small that the scientists call it a zero chance. We are here for one purpose: to reveal godliness in the world, to keep his Torah, to do good, to be good, to have empathy, to have compassion, not to be like the student who went to his rabbi and said, oh, if only I could be an animal. That we are. That we are. But the Torah and the Ten Commandments are here to refine all of us. Is it too late to start? No, it's not too late to start. We know from Rabbi Akiva, who was an ignoramus, illiterate, not even Jewish. At 40 years old, he had an insight. He was sitting and he saw drops of water had indented a rock. Over time, those little droplets of water made their mark in a stone. And he decided that if droplets of water can engrave a stone, then the words of Torah can surely change and carve me. And so he converted to Judaism. He studied Torah, he studied Hebrew, and he became one of the greatest rabbis that ever lived. In fact, when Moses was shown into the future and he learned and saw the teachings of Rabbi Akiva, he didn't even understand them. What that means, for another time. But the fact is, it's just to show the greatness of Rabbi Akiva, that he started so late and what he became. Now, as the Torah tells us, at this time, this day, they came into the wilderness. We are in the wilderness this day. And every day and today is our chance to bring the Torah alive, to be better people, to serve our families, to serve our parents, our friends, our neighbors, to have compassion, not to be jealous. Just don't be like the Faginnish, like you don't, you begrudge everybody the air they breathe because your life is not where their life is. Go back to the first commandment. Your life is where it's supposed to be because God is God. He knows what you need. So live in faith, not in fear. Shabbat Shalom. I hope that you appreciate the depth of this Shabbat and the greatness of the gift that we received. It's an eternal gift, not one that we open the packaging in 3 months we need to renew. It's not a gift that has an expiration date. In fact, the only thing that has expiration dates is us. And the Torah itself is the only thing that will give us eternal life. Shabbat Shalom.